Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the 4 pillars of a successful retirement. And as we mentioned before in our preview last couple of weeks, we're going to be covering 4 different parts of retirement. One will be Social Security and Medicare. The second part will be income strategies that I believe you'll find quite informative. Tax planning, which all too often gets overlooked as we go through that process of switching from a work mode to a retirement mode. And then in some cases, the final element would be legacy planning, because at the end of your lifespan, is it going to be important to make sure that whatever you have left goes to those that you love and want. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with today's first segment, and that would be Social Security. My name is Tom Doncaster. I'll be your host and moderator tonight. Just to give you an idea, I've been in the financial services business for a little over 33 years. I am an accredited investment fiduciary. So if you want to, in essence, either email us or call us here at the office after we finish with this 4-part series, be more than happy to, in essence, address any questions that you may have. So as we get started with Social Security, one of the things that most of us know is that it does provide a guaranteed lifetime income stream. So when it comes to things like addressing longevity, protection for your spouse, and other inflation items that come up, excuse me, those that element is a very important part of our planning. The history behind America's retirement safety net goes back to 1935, when it was first initiated by the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration. And that's how it got started. And in essence, in order to qualify for benefits, you have to have your 40 quarters in or 10 years of work history. And what they wind up doing is they take the highest 35, not the highest 5, but the highest 35 of your earnings history, and that's what determines what your primary insurance amount is going to be. And the spouse of an eligible worker is also eligible to tap into half of whatever the worker's benefit might be. In addition to that, an ex-spouse who is married for at least 10 years is also eligible to collect on the previous spouse's benefit as well. And we're also going to cover the surviving spouse or widow or widower's benefit as well. Now, most of you might know that you can go to ssa.gov and create your own online account. I would encourage you to do that. And the reason for that would be that you'd want to make sure that they have the correct earnings schedule for all these years that you've been working. And the reason I bring that up is that a few years back, like any true red-blooded American, I would get my statement, kind of bruise through it, and then file it away, never to be found. Well, 6-7 years ago, I decided to take a little bit more deeper look into it, and I found that there was a year there, I believe it was 2007, 2008, that showed that I had zeros across the board, that I had not worked that year, nor had I paid anything in. So I called up the Social Security Administration office and asked them about that, and they said, "Yes, Mr. Doncaster, we don't show that you paid in." And to that, I said to them, "Well, great. How about if you just send me a refund, because I've got the canceled checks that prove that you did receive money." And yeah, you guessed it. Yep, they laughed. And he said, "No, can't do that. But if you'll send us a copy of your tax return or W-2 statement, we'd be more than happy to correct it." So here I hot-footed it down to the local Social Security office, gave them a copy of that tax return. And 2 weeks later, guess what? It was corrected. And you want to make sure that they correct that, primarily because if you don't and you have a bunch of zeros there, that does reduce the amount of benefit that you're going to receive. And if you aren't diligent in reviewing it, no one else is going to do it for you. So if we go back and look at this next slide, discussing the cost of living allowance or inflation on Social Security, since 1975, the COLA increases for Social Security have averaged about 3.7%. If we just go back to the last 15 to 20 years, it's a little less than that. It's just a hair above 2%. So in essence, if you were to be receiving $1,500 a month on your estimates today, that could very well be a little bit more than what, 16, 1700 in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's important to take a look at that. Now, when you claim your Social Security benefits, everyone knows that you can start as early as 62. For most of us, full retirement now is at 66 to 67. And if you decide to wait till later, like say age 70, there is a benefit in doing that. However, when you do take the benefit at 62, you're taking a permanent reduction of approximately 25 to 30%. Whereas if you wait till your full retirement age, you get 100% of it. And if you decide that you want to wait till 70 because there's longevity in your family genes, you get an 8% guarantee increase on that benefit for every year beyond age 66. So in essence, it's a 32% increase at age 70. I got to tell you, that'll buy a lot of groceries. Now, here's what happens as far as when you are fully eligible to receive your full retirement amount. And as you can see, based on the year you were born, could be 66 and 2 months, 66 and 4 months, or even 66 and 10 months. And if you were born after 1960 or later, your full retirement age is now 67. So make sure you write that down because that's very important to know. Now, how are the claiming effects for taking it early versus waiting till full retirement? Well, this slide right here will give us an example of, let's say, someone, in this case being Todd, took his benefit at 62, which was going to be about $1,433. Whereas if he waited till his full retirement age at 66, it was going to be $2,000. And conversely, if you waited till 70, that would be what? $2,500. Now, Marion was born in what? 1960, whereas if you'll notice, Todd was born in 1958. And she paid into the system as well. So you'll notice that, first of all, Todd's full retirement age is 66 and 8 months, whereas Marion's is 67. So you'll notice what the differences are right there. And this is based on the fact that Marion had also paid into the system. She was not going to tap into a spousal benefit. So once again, it's important to crunch those numbers because you don't want to leave any money on the table. So how claiming age affects lifetime benefits? Well, as an example, here's one right here. At 62, if you were going to be receiving $1,500 versus at 66, $2,000 and 70, $2,640 over a period of what? From age 62, 62 or 70 all the way to age 90, you'll notice what the differences are right there, don't you? That first one is $504,000. If you waited till full retirement, you get an extra what? $72,000, which that's pretty substantial even over that period of time. And if you waited till 70, the maximum retirement age, then it would be $633,600, which is an extra what? $131,600. What I usually recommend is that if that delta is a difference of $50,000 or more, you really need to take a real strong hard look and crunch the numbers. Now, spousal benefits, okay? In order to be able to be eligible for that, the spouse must be age 62 or older to qualify. You have to have been married at least 1 year, and your spouse must first file for Social Security benefits, because the new rules that started as of April of 2016 basically say that if you're going to apply for a spousal benefit, in other words, 50% of whatever your spouse is going to be receiving, they have to have their benefit turned on. Otherwise, you cannot collect on the spousal benefit. And keep in mind that the new rules also say that if the primary person suspends their benefit and the spouse is collecting a spousal benefit, it will also suspend his or her benefit as well. Important to remember. So if you claim you're at your full retirement age, the spouse benefit will be exactly 50%, assuming that both of you are the same full retirement age, either 66 or 67. Keep that in mind because that's also very important. Now, how does the claiming age affect the spousal benefit? Well, just like when we noticed that at age 62, there is a reduction of 25 to 30%, the same thing happens whenever the spouse is younger. If if you'll notice there's the differences of how much less the spouse would receive if he or she started at 62, 63, 64, or anything before, in this case, full retirement age being 66. Very important to remember that. You don't want to leave any money on the table. So how filing for early benefits could reduce the spousal benefit? That's another thing that is very often overlooked. So as we know, the spouse is eligible for what? 50% of whatever the primary insured is going to receive, right? However, the two combined add up to quite a bit of a difference. So it's important to run those numbers. Now, here's an example of an excess spousal benefit case study, Sydney and Morgan. Okay, Sydney was eligible for $1,000 of primary insurance amount at age 66. Morgan was eligible for $2,400 at 66. Now, if Sydney claims an early age 62, in other words, Morgan decides he's going to start at 66, but because of the age difference between Morgan and Sydney, she decides to start hers at 62, then her benefit would drop from what? From getting $1,200 to $750. That's quite a bit of a difference, isn't it? So once again, if you're going to be younger, as far as having a younger spouse, you may want to wait a few extra years just to make sure you get the full 50% of that spousal benefit. Now, there's also a restricted application for the spousal benefit. However, in order to be eligible for that, the strategy is limited to married individuals who were born on or before January 1st of 1954. If you were born after that, you no longer have this restricted application option. So keep that in mind because that's going to be very, very important as we go down here a little bit further. So here's an example of a restricted application case study. Lisa was born in April of 54, filed for early workers' benefits in 2016 at age 62. Her worker benefit was reduced by 25%, but it would have been $1,400 had she waited till full retirement age of 66. Tom, on the other hand, was born in October of 1953. He turned 66 in October of 2019. His full benefit at age 66 was going to be $2,800, but he wants to wait for it to grow. Remember what I said? For every year that you wait above age 66, you get a guaranteed increase on that benefit of 8%, regardless of whether you're working anymore or not. So when Tom has reached his full retirement age, he can file a restricted application for spousal only benefits and receive what? $700. Why is that? Well, if his wife, Lisa, turns hers on, it's $1,400 at her age 66, and he decides he wants to file a restricted application, meaning he's going to file on his spouse, he will receive half of hers. Now, why would he want to do that when we already know that at 66, his would be what, $2,800? Well, by taking the lesser amount, which is the restricted application option, and receiving $700, his $2,800 is going to grow by 8% every year until he reaches age 70. And at age 70, what would it be? There it is right there on the bottom, just under $3,700. So you got to figure that what? 37 plus 14, how much is that? That's quite a bit, isn't it? Right? Yep. It's almost $5,000 per month combined. Whereas if they had both started at 66 and both turned on their benefits, his would have been 28, hers would have been 14, and that would have been what? About $4,200. So that's an extra $800 to $900 a month more. Folks, that'll buy a lot of extra groceries. So be cognizant of that, okay? Then there's the survivorship benefit for those that are widow or widowed. So survivorship benefit is based on the earnings of the person that died, okay? It's reduced. You can take it at age 60, but once again, just like when you take benefits at 62, they get reduced by 25 to 30. Then those extra 2 years, starting at 60 versus 62, will also get reduced by another 10 to 12%. Versus if that survivor were to wait until they turn full retirement age, then they would be eligible to receive 100% of whatever the deceased spouse would have gotten. Now, another thing to be said about that is that if you remarry before the age of 60, you'll forfeit that survivorship benefit. So keep that in mind. You may not want to get remarried until after you've turned on the survivorship benefit. Okay, so what about switching from a worker benefit to a survivor benefit? You can actually switch from survivor benefit, in other words, in this case, taking your deceased spouse's benefit, and then based on your work record, you could switch over to yours at a later time. So let's say you did start at 60, and then at 70, you recalculated what yours would be, you can switch over to yours and receive more money that way. Now, keep in mind that one of the things that you would have to contend with is that if you're going to continue to work, there is an earnings calculation that the IRS and Social Security will calculate to determine whether you're going to receive the full benefit or if they're going to start reducing it. More on that a little bit later, okay? So before you make a decision, I think it's important that you compare the two approaches. Just to give you an idea, we have been running a software program that is, in essence, connected with the Social Security calculations. It runs around 310 different options, and it comes back with the top 3 or the top 4 best options. So don't just take it for granted that if you're going to be using your own calculations, that you've covered all the bases. I find that more than 50% of the folks that come to visit with us don't, and they consequently leave money on the table. So if you're going to start your survivorship benefits as early as 60 and switch later, run those numbers to see what it winds up being. Whereas if you start your own retirement benefits as early as 62 and then switch to a survivorship benefit at full retirement age, that might possibly wind up giving you extra money. As I said, our software program runs 310 different calculations, and I can assure you we'll come up with the top best 3 or 4 options for you. Now, maximizing lifetime and survivorship benefits are also very important. On this particular slide, you can see the example that is given here of one scenario versus the second versus the third scenario. The first scenario is when both Janet and Paul take benefits early, which is at age 62. And it also mentions what the total benefits will be if Paul were to start at 62 and if he would pass away at age 80, which is roughly $615,000. And the monthly survivorship benefit to the spouse would be $1,500. So if the spouse continues to live for, let's say, an extra 10 more years, which there's a more than 50% probability that he or she will, that's an extra 10 years. So that extra $1,500 for 10 years runs up to what? From $615,600 to almost $800,000, $795,600. Now, if you'll notice, on the second middle scenario, Janet is taking it early. Paul is waiting till his full retirement age. And once again, we calculate age 80, where Paul passes away. That's $627,000. That's a little bit extra in comparison to the first scenario, right? However, look at what the survivorship benefit is, which that's another thing that gets overlooked very often for the final person that still is going to be around for probably another 10 more years. So that survivorship benefit would not be 15, but it would be $2,000 a month. The extra $500 is substantial in my book. Now, if Janet were to still live for an extra 10 years, that extra $2,000 is going to say what? They've received from $627,600 to as high as $867,600. So that's what? A difference of what? Another $72,000 more. And once again, that's more than that $50,000 delta that I was talking to you about. So it pays to definitely review it. And consequently, if you were to look at the third scenario, where once again, Janet still collects early. However, Paul decides he wants to wait until when? Full retirement age, or beyond that, actually, at 70. So the combined monthly benefits, if he was to do a restricted application on hers, remember? In other words, instead of his turning his on, she'll turn hers on, he'll collect half of hers. And then when he turns 70, he can switch over to his, and that bumps it up. So the first 8 years on that third scenario is $1,350. And then once he reaches age 70 and turns on his benefit, and she would receive what's called a spousal kicker, the total is just under $4,000 a month. Now, the grand total right there, when Paul passes away 10 years later, from 70 to 80, only adds up to about $8,400, which is less than the other two, right? However, once again, look at the survivorship benefit for the surviving spouse, $2,640. That's quite a bit of a difference. And if Janet were to live an extra 10 years, which, like I said, good probability she will, that adds up to a grand total of $925,200. So definitely pays to crunch those numbers. Now let's talk about folks that have been married and unfortunately they split and divorce. There's still a benefit to the ex as long as, number one, they were married for 10 years or longer. You've attained the minimum age required to, in essence, apply for Social Security benefits, which in this case would be age 62, and you're still unmarried, okay? That's how you can collect on the ex. And your own worker benefit, could be lower than your ex-spouse's benefit. So by tapping into theirs and still letting yours accrue up until age 70, then you could switch over to yours at that point if it's a higher benefit. Just another arrow in the quiver, okay? So how do you receive retroactive benefits? Well, one of the things that we always recommend is that you apply online, or if you want to come into our office, we can help you apply electronically. But we would recommend that you apply online 2 to 3 months before your birth date that designates your full retirement age, okay? Now you can request a lump sum payment for up to 6 months of retroactive benefits if, let's say, you pass your date of birth and you apply and you tell them that you want to go back to that startup, they will pay you those last 6 months as a lump sum and then pay you the monthly benefit. However, I will warn you, there is some talk about potentially eliminating that retroactive payment. So be careful and weigh that potential. Now, there's also what's called a do-over or a reset strategy. This is a once-in-a-lifetime that you can change your mind. In other words, let's say you started early at 62, 63, 64, and all of a sudden you attended one of these webinars that we put on and you found out, oh my God, I left some money on the table. As long as you have not collected the 12th month check, you can, in essence, fill out form SSA 521, which is a withdrawal of benefit statement or form. You have to pay back all the money that you received, and you would be able to, in essence, start up fresh at 66 or whatever, but you can only do that once in your lifetime, okay? And like I said, if you've collected more than 12 months, 13th, 14th month, sorry, Charlie, there's no redo, okay? So now, what about start, stop, restart strategy? Well, in order to voluntarily suspend benefits and restart them later, you must have reached full retirement age or later, 66, 67, okay? But keep in mind, the new rules say that whenever you suspend your benefit, it also suspends your spouse's if they're collecting a spousal benefit on your work record. Other factors that could reduce your Social Security payments would be, obviously, what's the tax structure going to be? Let's face it, folks, we're in a very low tax bracket environment today, and I've been working over 42 years, and I've never seen them this low. They are probably going to sunset at 2025 in the next 4 years, so keep that in mind. There's also that retirement earnings test, the windfall elimination period, and the government pension offset if you've been a civil service railroad type worker. And then there's also the Medicare Part B premiums that we have to contend with, which most people don't know, but Medicare Part B premiums are predicated on your income. So while you may think that everyone pays the same price, which currently it's at $144.50 a month, if you exceed more than $88,000 of adjusted gross income, then you're going to be paying more like $229.50 a month. And as a matter of fact, it keeps going up the more money you make in retirement. I have 3 cardiologists that retired about 5 years ago, and they're paying about $475 a month for Medicare Part B. So keep that in mind. You've been warned. Now, percentage of your Social Security benefits could be taxed, and also the earnings calculation, which we're going to talk about. So if you're a single tax filer and your modified adjusted gross income is somewhere between 25 and 34,000, they will bring back half of your Social Security benefits, 50% of them, and put them back in and tax them all over again. If you're over 34,000 of modified adjusted gross income, then that's where they'll bring back pretty much almost all of it. 85% of your Social Security is going to get retaxed again. Now, if you'll notice, the married joint filer thresholds are a little bit higher, but the same thing happens right there. So it's really very important to do your homework, find out how much money is going to be coming in from your pension, how much you'll eventually have to take out from your IRAs, because as you know, the new required minimum distribution age for any other qualified plan, 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, 457 plan is now age 72. That's generally where most people get stabbed really hard because they didn't calculate that. And all of a sudden they're having to have their Social Security benefits taxed all over again. Now, if you do decide to turn on your Social Security early before full retirement age, there is what's called the retirement earnings test. They apply only if you're working and receiving Social Security benefits prior to reaching your full retirement age. And this is only based on earnings, in other words, earned income. Money coming in from IRAs, 401ks, pensions, those don't count. It's only earned income. So if this occurs, for every dollar of benefit that you receive from Social Security, the threshold is $18,240 is what it was for 2020. For 2021, it's $18,600. So let's just assume that you made $40,000 in earned income and modified adjusted gross income rather, and you've exceeded that, obviously, $18,240, right? That means that they're going to be reducing your Social Security benefit, where it could potentially be 100% wiped out. Now, some folks call it a penalty, but it's actually a deferral, which means since you're still paying into the system, you're still generating income, they're going to have to redo the calculation every year. Once you reach full retirement age, then that earnings calculation goes away. So in many cases, it probably pays to wait because of the fact that most people are making 55, 60, 100, 150,000. Why turn it on if it's going to get wiped out anyway and deferred? Now, the windfall elimination provision is this, okay? And we're looking at it starting if you applied for Social Security at age 62. There are maximum monthly amounts that benefits can be reduced based on eligibility year when you reach age 62. When you have 20 years or less of substantial earnings subject to Social Security tax. So the maximum reduction back in 2011 was $374.50 a month. Last year it was $480. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the 2021 is going to be right at about $500. So keep that in mind, because if you're affected by the windfall elimination period, okay, and you'll know if you are, you'll want to make sure you do this calculation. Then there's also the government pension offset. These are be for civil service, railroad retirement folks that retired prior to 1980. So the GPO could reduce spousal or spousal benefits by 2/3 of the pension. We've used this example for Julie, who receives $900 of monthly government civil service pension. So eligible for a $1,000 spousal benefit could be reduced by the government pension offset. So in essence, $1,000 less 600, which is 900 times 2/3 of the pension equals $400, right? So in essence, the combined is going to be what? $900 from the pension, $400 would be what you would receive for the spousal benefit. So it'd be a total of $1,300 versus $1,600 or more. So keep that in mind. And you know who you guys are out there. So Medicare premiums, okay, they're automatically deducted once you start your Social Security. And the way that they calculate what your premium is going to be is based on the adjusted gross income reported on your tax return 2 years prior to starting the plan. So if you start at 65, that means they're going to take your wages of your tax return from age 63. And keep in mind, if it's under $88,000 for this year of 2021, you pay what everyone else pays, $144.50 a month for Medicare Part B. If it's more than that, then you get to pay more. Now, Medicare Part A versus Medicare Part B. This is something extremely important because everyone assumes that Medicare Part A is free. Well, yes and no. There isn't a cost for it as long as you've got your 40 quarters that you've paid in, right? But if you didn't, and let's say you only paid in your 20 quarters versus 40, then you get to pay $252 a month for Medicare Part A. If you didn't pay any of your 40 quarters in for whatever reason, then you get to pay the full amount, which is $458 for Medicare Part A. Now, once again, as I mentioned earlier, Medicare Part B for most people is $144 and change every month, right? Now, Part B, based on whether or not you're making 88 or more per year, could go up to the next run, which is 202 plus, as high as 291.60. Keep in mind that the annual deductible for Medicare Part B is just under $200. Unless, of course, if you buy a Medicare supplement that could potentially take care of that. But that's generally what it's going to be for most people. Now, when should you enroll in Medicare? Well, just like in Social Security, I would recommend 2 to 3 months before you turn age 65, if that is truly going to be the date that you're going to retire. Now, some of you might be covered through a group plan through your employer, and maybe perhaps you don't want to retire at 65. You want to wait till 66, 67, or 68. You can do that. You don't have to apply for Medicare until you have what's called a triggering event. So even though you didn't turn it on at 65, but you worked with your employer who has a group plan and you're 68, once again, I would do it 2 months before you turn 68. And that way you can, in essence, do the electronic application either yourself, or if you want to come in and have someone like me help you, I can do it in 15 minutes because I've done it very, very often. In essence, what happens then is that you'll have to provide proof that you were covered through a group plan. It's terminating at a certain date, usually a week before you turn 67, 68, whatever it might be. And then the portability plan kicks in. Your group plan shuts off, Medicare takes over from that point forward. So keep that in mind. You don't have to wait till open enrollment if you have a triggering event. More on that later. So now I'm going to give you a little quiz here, see if you've been paying attention. True or false? Social Security misconceptions. Number 1, I can receive 2 benefits simultaneously on a Social Security spousal benefit and one based on my own work record. Yes or no? Number 2, the benefits I receive will exceed the payroll taxes I paid over my career. Is that true or is that false? Number 3, Social Security is going bankrupt. So, excuse me. So the first one is, I can receive 2 benefits simultaneously, a spouse benefit and one based on my own work record. That is correct. You can collect on yours, and then once your spouse turns on his or her Social Security, you'll get a spousal benefit. Could be anywhere from $250 to $500 extra per month. So that is true. The benefits I receive will exceed the payroll taxes I paid over my career. Not necessarily. I've already calculated mine, and I've paid into Social Security about $255,000 and Medicare another $175,000. So that's definitely over 400 some odd thousand. And my benefit at age 70 would be about $3,200. So per year, that's about what, 38,000. So that means I'm going to have to work at least 15 to 16 years to get my principal back. Social Security is going bankrupt. No, it is not. However, I will tell you that based on the current payments that go out versus the amount of people that are paying into the system, unless they do a couple of modifications in the next, say, couple, 2-3 years, by 2036, we might all have to experience a 22 to a 24% reduction in the monthly benefit payment. So it won't go bankrupt, but we could potentially might face a reduction, okay? Two things that they're looking at doing right now is raising the cap on Social Security, which for this year, I believe it's $138,000 that you can make, and then you don't have to pay into the Social Security system. They're talking with regards to raising that to $400,000 or maybe even uncapping it. Either one would extend it for an extra, 15 to 16 years. And then, of course, the other item would be the 6.75% that you pay into the system and the employer pays into the system. There's talk about raising it by 1%. That would also stretch it out another 15, possibly 20 years. So in terms of baby boomers, hey, I don't think you have a whole lot to worry about, but our children probably do. More on that later. So the uncertainty of America's retirement safety net, as I mentioned earlier, it's sufficient to pay the scheduled benefits until 2035, and then at 2036, we could see a 22 to 24% reduction. Well, folks, that is it for now. That took about less than 40 minutes. So we're going to, in essence, adjourn tonight. However, we do want to, in essence, make mention that if you want to give us a call, and you might want to write this down, our telephone number here at the office is 509-735-9518. And our email address, if you'd like to email us with any questions or schedule an appointment to come in and discuss with us these items, it's Thomas, Thomas, Doncaster, Doncaster, it's all lowercase run together, at msn.com, which is an abbreviation for Microsoft Network. Got to keep Billy in business, okay? Or if you'd like to visit us at our website, easy one, www.tomdoncaster.com, tomdoncaster.com. Folks, thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a great evening.